Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. In a shocking turn of events no one expected, Wendy Williams, the queen of hot topics, long silenced by the industry, has taken the witness stand in federal court. After decades of whispers, suspicion, and unrelenting backlash, Wendy is finally going on record. Her testimony isn't just about Diddy, it's a scorching expose of systemic abuse, silence, and protection in hip-hop and the broader entertainment world, implicating names from Jay-Z to R. Kelly. With receipts in hand, dates, quotes, and haunting recollections, Wendy's appearance wasn't a tabloid moment. It was a bombshell sworn deposition with the entire courtroom listening. What she revealed about Diddy, Jay-Z, and their toxic connection could shake the industry to its core. Buckle up, because Wendy Williams just turned that courtroom into her signature purple chair. When she entered, it didn't feel like a celebrity spectacle. It felt like a survivor who had clawed her way out of an early grave to finally speak the truth. She wasn't there for headlines or drama. She was there because for years, media giants tried to silence her with lawsuits, threats, blackballing, and ridicule. And now, every warning, every rumor she aired on her old radio show is part of a federal case. She calmly took her seat, adjusted her mic, and stared directly at the jury. "I was never messy. I was never bitter. I was never lying. I was early," she said with deliberate clarity. Wasting no time, Wendy reminded the court why she was there: to testify under oath about the behaviors, threats, cover-ups, and patterns she had long accused Sean Diddy Combs of orchestrating. "When I first started talking about Diddy," she explained, "I wasn't trying to tear him down. I was trying to wake people up." The courtroom watched as she placed a stack of documents before her, printouts of old radio show transcripts, damning emails from executives, and a chronological timeline of Diddy's alleged efforts to silence her. She began in the early 2000s. He was protected. Everybody knew it. You couldn't talk about Puff without getting a call within the hour. She described multiple instances where radio station managers warned her, advertisers pulled their support, and veiled threats arrived cloaked in concern. "You're doing too much, Wendy," they'd tell her. "You're going to get hurt." She described being literally chased out of her radio station by a girl group allegedly sent by Diddy himself. Wendy said, "I told them they were broke, and within hours, they were waiting outside my building. That's not coincidence. That's coordination." She painted her career as a battlefield, explaining that every time she exposed something about Diddy, from his wild parties to how he treated his artists, her world would crumble. Sponsors vanished, syndication deals disappeared, network invites evaporated. But she refused to back down. "You can blackball me, you can threaten me, but you can't erase me. And now I'm under oath. So I hope they're listening, because I'm not stopping until the truth is loud enough to shut their machine down." When the prosecution asked about the culture surrounding Diddy, Wendy shifted focus to someone she'd long warned the public about: Jay-Z. Her tone sharpened. "You can't talk about what Diddy did without talking about the people who stood next to him, smiled with him while the abuse was happening. That includes Jay-Z." Her eyes scanned the jury before she leaned in. "Y'all remember Foxy Brown? She was 15, Jay-Z was 27, and he was everywhere with her." She pulled out lyrics from Foxy's debut album, songs Jay-Z reportedly wrote: "Ain't no nump like the one I got, no one can do me better." She read them deliberately, and the courtroom recoiled. "You tell me," she said, "why was a grown man writing those lyrics for a child?" Wendy went deeper, revealing details only someone inside the industry could know. Rumors of Jay picking Foxy up from high school, lavish gifts, shopping sprees, hair appointments paid for by a man almost twice her age. This wasn't a label signing, this was grooming. And then Wendy dropped something even darker. Wendy spoke of an alleged tape, a rumor that had circulated for years, involving Jay-Z, Foxy Brown, and Jamie Foxx. "You never heard about it again, did you?" she asked, her voice cool but deliberate. "That's because not long after, Foxy's home was burglarized. The tape, gone." She let the silence settle, then added, "Coincidence? I think not." She went on to say she was fired from her top-rated radio show shortly after publicly suggesting that Jay-Z's relationships with underage girls warranted investigation. "They called me toxic," she said, "but now you're seeing that everything I asked was worth asking." When the prosecution pressed her for evidence, Wendy didn't flinch. She cited emails, call logs, producers who had backed out of her show the moment Jay-Z's name came up. She testified that his team made quiet calls to industry insiders, blacklisting anyone who dared to mention Foxy Brown. "They turned me into the villain," she said, "just for asking what any decent person should have asked." Then she looked the jury dead in the eye. "You think I lost sponsors for being messy? No, I lost sponsors because I was right, and they couldn't let that truth spread." Then came the part Wendy said no one wanted to believe, the reason she'd been branded a liar, a loudmouth, and worse. "I was the first to say it," she told the court. "Those weren't parties, they were operations." She was referring to the now infamous freak-offs, a term central to the federal indictment against Diddy. Wendy said she first heard whispers of these events back in the late 90s, when Bad Boy was at its height. Phones were taken at the door, guests signed NDAs, there were candle escorts, cameras, people assigned to specific rooms. This wasn't a house party, it was a ritual. She cited Karen Superhead Stefans, who had once told Wendy live on air that Diddy invited her to one of these parties and asked for male involvement. "Superhead didn't lie," Wendy said. "She described everything. The paranoia, the drugs, the setups. He was afraid she'd expose him." Wendy leaned forward again. "And I made sure people heard that interview. I played it again and again because the truth was too heavy to let it pass." She recalled other similar stories, men and women who'd attended Diddy's events and returned visibly shaken. They didn't just party, they were told what to do, what to wear, who to touch, what room to go in. Wendy said she personally spoke with 3 individuals who described seeing IV bags used to recover after the parties, just as detailed in the current indictment. "There were medical assistants on standby," she said. "This wasn't socializing, this was organized depravity." Finally, she handed the court a list, pseudonyms only, of those who had given her their testimonies in confidence. One by one, as the court reviewed her account, the stories aligned with the very patterns now under federal investigation. Described by Cassie Ventura, Gina Huyn, and other witnesses in the case, Wendy's next revelation hit like a thunderclap. "The baby oil," she said. "I mentioned it on air as a joke, but it wasn't funny. They really found over 1,000 bottles, just like I said. You know how I knew? Because people told me, and I was the only one willing to say it." Sitting back in her chair, calm and composed, she looked directly at Diddy. "All these years later, and we're finally here. Now it's not gossip, it's evidence." As the courtroom held its breath, Wendy shifted her focus to someone she'd defended for years, Cassie Ventura. "I said it back then," she declared, her eyes never leaving the jury. "Y'all were mesmerized by the diamonds, the music videos, the red carpets. But I saw a scared girl. I saw imbalance, and I said it on the air. Something about that relationship was off." She testified that as early as 2008, she'd warned listeners about the obsessive control Diddy allegedly held over Cassie. She was 19, he was pushing 40. That's not love, that's leverage. Wendy broke down how Diddy's empire, the jets, the security, the industry reach, made it nearly impossible for Cassie to leave. "I said it then, and I'll say it now. She didn't need a boyfriend. She needed a bodyguard." She reminded the courtroom of a clip she'd aired on her show, where Cassie looked down during an interview and flinched when Diddy raised his voice. People called it nerves. I called it trauma, but nobody listened. The prosecution then submitted into evidence a timeline of Wendy's broadcasts, each eerily mirroring Cassie's legal claims. "I was told he had access to her phones, that he'd show up at hotels unannounced, that staff were instructed to unlock her doors." She paused. "And when I said that out loud, my show sponsors pulled the plug." Wendy referenced the 2018 incident when Cassie reportedly ended the relationship after Diddy allegedly forced his way into her home. That wasn't the first time he showed up uninvited. She turned back to the jury. "People don't understand. When a mogul wants control, they don't need permission. They make the world rearrange itself for them." Wendy then delivered a chilling analysis of how these power dynamics unfold. The grooming, the isolation, the manipulation of luxury to enforce obedience. He didn't just love Cassie, he owned her. And when she broke that chain, she became dangerous. She ended with a stark truth. Everything in that lawsuit, I saw the signs. I said it publicly. And now finally she's being heard. But at what cost? Wendy adjusted her mic again, her voice steady but slower, deliberate. You don't get to talk about men like Diddy and walk away clean, she said. I knew that, but I didn't realize how deep it would go until it happened. She testified that in 2004, during the peak of her radio dominance, she received a chilling message from a record label executive. Stop talking about Puff, or else. Wendy didn't flinch. She kept going, and within a week, she was yanked from her afternoon time slot. They didn't even pretend it wasn't about him, she said. It was punishment. She revealed that multiple sources confirmed Diddy had made strategic phone calls to label heads, promoters, and radio networks, warning them to distance themselves from her. One program director said it to her face. You went too far. You poked the wrong bear. Wendy recounted how she was nearly attacked outside her studio by the girl group Total after calling them washed up and broke on air. And you think they just showed up randomly? She asked. No, they were sent. She painted the moment in sharp detail. Fans pressed to the glass of her radio lobby, her boyfriend waiting in the car, her intern panicking. That wasn't just a confrontation, that was a message. They wanted me to know, we can get to you. She then spoke of being disinvited from BET events, denied media passes, and losing lucrative ad deals. All coordinated efforts, she said. Diddy didn't just want to stop me, he wanted to erase me. Wendy presented printed emails from PR firms representing Bad Boy at the time, each one cutting ties with her platform. One read, per client instruction, we will no longer be booking talent on Wendy Williams' show. She held the paper up. That client, Sean Combs. She added, I wasn't the first to be blackballed, but I was one of the few who stayed loud about it. Then she turned to the jury, eyes sharp. That's what he does. If you speak, you lose everything. Your mic, your money, your name. But I didn't fold. I talked through the silence. And here I am. After a moment, she recalled a surreal chapter from her past. We come from a very homosexual era of hip-hop, she said, quoting herself from years prior. That wasn't shade. That was truth. And for saying it, I was burned at the stake. She explained how in the early 2000s, there was a quiet but brutal campaign to protect certain stars by publicly shaming those who dared to question them. I had Charlemagne on air with me back then, and even we knew there were things you just didn't say if you wanted to stay employed. But I said it anyway. She pointed to her 2004 book, The Wendy Williams Experience, packed with coded references and veiled warnings about Diddy, Jay-Z, and their after-dark lifestyles. People called it gossip, but now the government calls it evidence. Wendy then recounted her 2009 interview with former Bad Boy artist Mark Curry, who had just written Dancing with the Devil. He called Diddy the shadow that ruins people. I agreed, and suddenly that interview vanished from the radio station archives. She testified that every time she tried to give a platform to someone critical of the industry, Superhead, Gene Deal, Jaguar Wright, she was met with resistance, emails, threats, even FCC complaints. They tried to shut me down from every angle they could. Then she dropped a final revelation that caught the court's attention. There was a list, she said, not written down, but everyone in the industry knew it. The list, a silent, unwritten blacklist of people you weren't allowed to question, let alone expose. And when I broke that rule, Wendy said, I paid. She explained how her iconic Hot Topics segments were constantly flagged for review, how show producers were threatened by talent reps, and how network executives pulled her aside with quiet warnings to back off. They told me I was going to mess it all up, for the station, for myself, for everyone, she paused. But now it's all messed up anyway, because the truth is out. Her voice lowered as she delivered the next line, full of weight. This trial isn't the beginning, it's the end. The end of a cover-up. And I want the jury to know, I've been sounding this alarm for 20 years. You all just finally heard it. As she looked across the courtroom, her tone sharpened, no longer just reflective but cutting. "You think this is just about Diddy? You're wrong." She locked eyes with the jury. "This is about the ecosystem that protected him. And that includes names you were never supposed to hear in a courtroom: Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey." A collective stillness fell over the room as the prosecution asked her to elaborate, and Wendy didn't flinch. "There's a list in Hollywood," she said. "Not one you'll ever see, not one you'll ever hold, but it's real. It's the list of people you do not cross. And if you do, you disappear." She recalled the aftermath of her most controversial radio segments, when she exposed not just Diddy's alleged manipulation in parties, but also dared to speak the names of those helping him stay untouchable. "I had sources, real ones, producers, agents, people inside the system, and they told me flat out, 'Wendy, your name is being passed around. They don't want you touching certain topics. You're being labeled unstable.' Everyone in the industry knew it. The list. A silent, unwritten blacklist of people you weren't allowed to question, let alone expose. And when I broke that rule," Wendy said, "I paid." She explained how her iconic Hot Topics segments were constantly flagged for review, how show producers were threatened by talent reps, and how network executives pulled her aside with quiet warnings to back off. "They told me I was going to mess it all up. For the station, for myself, for everyone." She paused. "But now it's all messed up anyway, because the truth is out." Her voice lowered as she delivered the next line, full of weight. "This trial isn't the beginning. It's the end of a cover-up. And I want the jury to know, I've been sounding this alarm for 20 years. You all just finally heard it." As she looked across the courtroom, her tone sharpened, no longer just reflective but cutting. "You think this is just about Diddy? You're wrong." She locked eyes with the jury. "This is about the ecosystem that protected him. And that includes names you were never supposed to hear in a courtroom: Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey." A collective stillness fell over the room as the prosecution asked her to elaborate, and Wendy didn't flinch. "There's a list in Hollywood," she said. "Not one you'll ever see, not one you'll ever hold, but it's real. It's the list of people you do not cross. And if you do, you disappear." She recalled the aftermath of her most controversial radio segments, when she exposed not just Diddy's alleged manipulation in parties, but also dared to speak the names of those helping him stay untouchable. "I had sources, real ones, producers, agents, people inside the system, and they told me flat out, 'Wendy, your name is being passed around. They don't want you touching certain topics. You're being labeled unstable.'" Wendy explained that after her fallout with the Precious team, a film heavily backed by both Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey, her access to the industry collapsed overnight. "I went from getting invites to premieres to being wiped off the guest list," she recalled. One executive didn't sugarcoat it. "Oprah's people don't want you near her anymore. That's power." And that power, Wendy said, wasn't just about influence. It was being wielded to shield people like Diddy. Then came a chilling moment. Wendy testified that she once confided in Oprah privately about her own experience with abuse. Oprah promised her respect, said she would never exploit that story, and then, not long after, Wendy's abuser was featured on Oprah's show, while Wendy herself was blackballed. "That wasn't just betrayal," she said to the stunned courtroom. "That was retaliation." Wendy laid it bare. They smiled with him, they took pictures, they stood beside Diddy while the rest of us were getting crushed for speaking out. And I know why. Because they needed him. For deals, for reach, for silence. Then she revealed an email that had been accidentally forwarded to her. A crisis communications thread involving both Tyler Perry's studio and a Bad Boy affiliated brand. The subject line read simply, "Managing optics, Wendy, Puff, Tyler." That was all it said. But for Wendy, it was everything. She looked straight ahead as she delivered the next line like a verdict. These aren't just isolated stars. They're a machine that feeds on silence and destroys anyone who dares to pull the curtain back. The courtroom's tension was now palpable, but Wendy wasn't finished. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. Prosecutors would later call this moment the turning point. This, she said, tapping the cover, is a collection of NDAs, email threads, and internal memos that were never supposed to see the light of day. She made it clear she hadn't hacked them. They came from former insiders, industry veterans who had walked away and finally had enough. They were tired, Wendy said. Tired of watching women disappear, tired of watching the truth get labeled gossip. She opened the folder and read from a 2007 NDA, the name redacted, the wording chilling. Subject agrees not to disclose any private gatherings, recordings, or interactions with Sean Combs, his guests, or associates. Violation of this agreement may result in financial penalties and public retaliation. Wendy slammed the page on the desk. Public retaliation! That's how deep it went. Then she read from an internal email dated 2015, sent from a luxury hotel chain. We have prepared the presidential suite with all requested amenities, including extra linens, candle lighting, and discretion measures. Mr. Combs' assistant will arrive for setup prior to guest entry. Cassie was still with Diddy at that time. Wendy's voice cut through the silence. You think this was just celebrity partying? No, this was a system. This was planned. It was funded, scheduled, and cleaned up afterward. That's how Wendy described the system, revealing that she had evidence of payments made to publicists, talent managers, even bloggers, all tasked with managing the narrative. One internal email she presented instructed a writer to avoid any mention of recent rumors and instead publish a glowing article on Diddy's philanthropic efforts. Then came the photo, one the prosecution displayed prominently to the jury. Diddy, Tyler Perry, and a well-known crisis media consultant standing shoulder to shoulder at a 2019 gala, all smiles. Smiling, Wendy said, while women were getting paid to shut up, and others were being destroyed for refusing to sign. She testified that she too was once offered an NDA, along with the promise of a nationally syndicated TV deal if she just stopped covering certain stories. I said no, she told the jury, and I paid the price. The courtroom remained silent as she delivered her final blow. The silence they bought cost others their freedom, their peace, their truth. And now it's all unraveling, one NDA at a time. As Wendy Williams entered the final moments of her testimony, she didn't waver, didn't cry. She simply sat with the weight of 20 years spent warning a world that refused to listen. You see Diddy on trial, she said, her voice measured and clear, but I see something much bigger. This isn't just about what he did, it's about who let him do it. She gestured toward the defense table. You see one man, but behind him is a legacy of silence. A tower built on fear, NDAs, power plays, party invitations, and billion-dollar handshakes. Then turning to the jury, she continued. And every time someone tried to speak, that tower crushed them. She reminded the court that while Diddy may be the one facing charges, others, Jay-Z, Perry, Oprah, the labels, the handlers, had all stood by silently, some even witnessing the abuse firsthand. They shook his hand, they took his checks, and they made sure anyone who asked questions was pushed out. Wendy concluded her testimony with the same unapologetic voice that once defined her airwaves. Fierce, unfiltered, unflinching. I was called bitter. I was called crazy. But I was right, and I would rather be right in hell than be silent in heaven. She looked directly at Diddy, who had sat mostly expressionless through her entire testimony. You thought I was gone. You thought your power was enough. But now you sit where the truth finally caught up to you, and I hope it's loud. Before stepping down, Wendy turned once more toward the gallery. This trial isn't the end. It's the beginning of people finally naming names, of walls cracking, of the whole tower one day falling down. And with that, she walked out.